This week, Unicorn Whisper, we have Phil Strazzulla here to talk about everything related to buying HR tech. I think I'm super interested in your background. You kind of got to HR, got to the people side of things with a much different path than a lot of the folks that I talk to on the podcast. So I'm interested to dive into that. But your specialty is around RFPing, selecting, buying software, and you've developed some pretty cool things around that that I want to dive into. But I guess before we even dive into the meat and potatoes, like give us your intro. How'd you get to where you are today? What brings you the Unicorn Whisper?
Sure. Thanks for having me. So I started my career off working in venture capital, doing early stage software investing. Always been interested in investing, been investing since I was 12 years old. Went to Harvard Business School to get my MBA. And while I was there, I really wanted to start my own business. So I taught myself how to program and I just started working on different projects, one of which was a platform where people could share what they did for work and how they got there and all this stuff. It was sort of the same time that Glassdoor was becoming more and more popular. And so a few HR people saw this platform, not that it was, widely used. It was probably had, 10,000 users or something like that. But they were like, hey, could we put our employee stories on this? Because our worst employees are going on this website called Glassdoor and just ranting about how terrible we are. And we'd love to showcase what's it like to be a sales rep at our company? What's it like to be a female executive, et cetera? And I was like, yeah, sure, that sounds great. And then the next question was, well, can we put it on our career site? Can we put it in our talent communities? Can we put it on our social media, et cetera? And it was like, oh, okay, like this is like a business. A friend and I built out a product suite and we built this SaaS in the employer branding space that is still up and running. They're companies where we've been running their career site for 10 years at this point. I left the business in 2018 because I wanted to do something else. And I was actually doing fractional HR talent acquisition type work. My biggest claim to fame is helping a company scale from 3,000 to 300 to 3,000 employees in about 15 months. Bought a ton of software, realized that buying software is really hard. Most companies do a poor job of it because you're just busy with everything else going on. And it's sort of like buying a house or climbing a mountain or whatever. Like it's nice to have a guide, and there weren't many good guides out there. So I started SelectSoftware Reviews. Our North Star is to help HR professionals find and buy the right software. We do this through user generated reviews. We do this through editorialized reviews. We have newsletters and webinars and all sorts of educational materials around buying HR tech. And then we also have a team of advisors that you can talk to and you can say, hey, 200 person nonprofit or we're a 5,000 employee global company or whatever, like what should we be using for HRIS, payroll, EOR, performance management, et cetera? And we'll look at our database and tell you. And then we also have a GBT version of that as well. So that's my story and that's what I do.
Yeah, I'm always interested, especially coming from Harvard Business School, the choice into the people side of things. So Unicorn's kind of whole mantra is that there isn't really a dedicated career path for TA or recruiting or HR as much as there is in other disciplines. And so when folks come from outside the discipline and go into it, most of us start by either being good at talking, being personable, and then working our way from the entry level up through the ranks. But what drew you to the HR space, and what do you think has made you successful in coming from outside the HR space, being in HR? Like,
So like most people, I didn't plan on being in it. I got sort of pulled into it. I took an aptitude test in like maybe a sophomore year of college or something like that. And you basically answer all these questions and it told me that I should either be in private equity or be in HR. So, which is kind of weird because the investing part, I did that professionally. I still do it sort of as a side thing. And then HR, I have always been interested in why people make these decisions. How do you build culture? All this like HR type stuff. So there was some sort of like latent interest, but it was pure serendipity of how I got into it and how I even stayed in it, to be honest with you. So I think having an outsider perspective is always good. Being from an MBA background, that sort of business mind is different in many ways from a lot of folks that get into HR, thinking about stuff more in a spreadsheet sometimes than the softer side of things, which is good and bad. It's certainly differentiated. And I think that's probably allowed me to stand out a little bit in a good way.
What type of things do if someone's not, if someone's a more traditional HR career path, like what from your skill set, what are you telling them that they should be looking at to try to broaden their horizons and maybe expand their skill set, right? So like what are the non-HR things that you brought into the space that you advise people to say like, hey, go get this skill set, go figure out how to, be more analytical or write code or think in the investor mindset. Like what are the things that you're telling, the traditional HR career path to expand their skill set with?
I think for me, the biggest thing is financial literacy and how do you impact your business. So it's great to have a pretty career website, but how does that impact your business? Maybe it decreases time to fill, maybe decreases cost per hire. How do you translate that back into the income statement? I always think about this like cold hearted CFO and how do you impress that person? And it's revenue, it's EBITDA, it's gross profit. So understanding those metrics more comprehensively and also how you impact those on the TA or HR side is something that I've been talking about a lot for a long time.
So, how do you encourage heads of people or heads of TA to frame their work in terms of financial ROI? Is there a metric that you target, or is there a specific kind of like rule of thumb for how people spend money or ask for budget in TA or
In terms of the actual ROI calc itself, it depends on what you're doing. So we on our website, we have a ton of like, if you're gonna implement a new ATS, like here's how you think about ROI, which is totally different from performance management, which is different from payroll, which is different from you name it. And so there's all these different variants for the same thing, which is how do you impact the business? How do you either increase revenue or decrease costs? I think that a lot of the buying HR software where you can do a great job is internal stakeholder alignment. And a lot of that is budgeting and business impact and return on analysis or return on investment analysis. The problem is that a lot of people who are good at HR, who are good at the people side of things, they didn't come up with the business background. They're not like ex private equity investors who got into this. Some of them are. I remember the Wayfair chief people officer. I think she's since moved on, but she was like a Bain Capital private equity investor who came in the CFO's office and became the head of people. But that's extremely atypical, right? So I recommend get somebody in your organization who you can sort of ally yourself with and get their insights. Or now you can actually use our GPT too. It's trained on different ROI analyses as well.
Yeah, and we'll put a link to the GPT in kind of the podcast description below. So for anyone who's interested, you could go directly onto the Select Software Reviews ChatGPT and kind of ask some back and forth questions about your software stack or how to select either which software is right for you or different cost. I want to say which software, what cost, and what the ROI is. Are those like good questions that people could ask of the GPT?
Yeah, that's a great list of questions.
So before we get into I guess how to select software, because I'm in this month's newsletter, we're going to release our kind of like, we call it a problem statement or an intake session for net new software, where it's like deciding what the actual problem is that you're going to solve, not only for you or your partner team members, but associating a number and ROI with it through this process. So I'm very curious to know how you go about quantifying a problem statement in two ways. So one, the near term ROI. So what hours will it reduce? What money will it save? Speed to value, et cetera. And then how do you incorporate in longer term ROI, right? So like for more advanced platforms, it might solve something today, but having data in a platform versus spreadsheet might actually solve a long term year over year issue because you now have organized data to make better insights later. So, how do you go about doing a problem statement? How do you go intake a problem to be solved with software? And then how do you quantify that as you go through the approval path?
I think for me, it's always been intuitive. And that's why I always say, like, try to find that person in your company that it just like is kind of obvious to them. So there's a reason you're buying software. What is that reason? And it better be tied back to the business. Otherwise, it's just like a fun project. So, for example, you're buying a new applicant tracking system because your recruiter efficiency is really low, or because your time to fill is really high, or your cost per hire is really high. And so if your average recruiter is hiring 3 people a month, and maybe you think they should be hiring 6 people a month, and buying that new applicant tracking system is going to allow you over time to decrease your internal recruiter headcount spend by 50%. And that shows up in the P&L. If it's that you just like can't hire people because you're so disorganized and there's no collaboration between sourcers and recruiters and hiring managers and other people in the interview panels, et cetera, and you're losing applicants and the process is taking forever, you're going to decrease time to fill. What's your employee worth per day? It's probably a multiple of their salary. And if you can decrease it by 3 days and you're hiring 100 people, that's more than a year's worth of employee in your company. And so what's that employee worth? That they're getting paid 200,000 bucks, maybe they're worth $600,000. So decreasing by three time fill 3 days is $600,000. Whatever that reason is that you're doing the thing, that translates into dollars and cents if you take it a logical step or two further. I think sometimes it's hard though for people to take it that next step or two because they're just like, I don't know, our career site looks terrible and I want it not to look bad. And that's like your gut instinct is 100% right. You're losing candidates. But what you really need to understand is like, okay, why does that matter? It matters because the conversion rate of visitor to applicant is 3% and it should be 11%. And so increasing it to 11% means that we're getting X number of new candidates, applicants, a higher ratio of Y. This is how many hires we're going to get for free, which decreases our overall cost per hire by X, Y, and Z. Fill in the blanks there for your company. So that's kind of the general framework, some specifics. And as you can see, I think you got to find the person where it's just like obvious to them, like how to structure that together and put it in a spreadsheet.
Yeah, it sounds like there's two skill sets, right? Like one to define the problem, the other one to quantify the value. And if that's in the same person, that's the unicorn, right? If we're going to use our language, but like defining the problem of what you want to solve, whether it's a better career site or a more efficient process or faster time to fill, better sourcing rates, whatever it is, like defining the problem is figuring out how there's a gap with what you do today and then quantifying the values, then finding the associated dollar amount or metric, right? Value could be dollars, but it could be something else on top of dollars as well. So if the marketing team values an aligned brand for your career site, then that could be of value as much as like reducing the time to hire or reducing the conversion ratio of a source to applicant ratio, right? So it's like you have to find and then figure out who the decision makers are in that system. So whenever in our kind of how to buy HR tech toolkit, there's defining the problem and then there's figuring out like what is the process for selecting this software and who needs to say yes or no. And so building a case, a financial case, building an operational case, building a marketing case, these are all going to matter depending on like what type of software you're trying to buy, what type of problem that you try to solve. Um, but you know, the next before I get into it, the next thing I want to talk about is like the RFP process and codifying all of it. Before we get into it, right? Like, what is your general advice to people looking to the software market for a solution, right? So if they have a general problem to solve and they want to go look at the market, where do they start? What's the first place that they should go and why?
Yeah, I mean, candidly, they should talk to our advisors because it's just going to save you an insane amount of time and effort. But you basically want to understand like what are the 3 to 5 solutions that I want to actually look at. Getting that list is really hard. We've talked to people who, you know, maybe I'm always curious, like here's your list of sometimes it's 15 companies that you looked at. How did you build that list? And we hear Instagram ads. We hear, I posted on LinkedIn, I posted on a community, asked people what they use. I went to ChatGPT, I went to G2, all these different things. And I think they all have There are pluses and minuses, but you want to try to find somebody who, brokers obviously are a big thing too. You want to find somebody who has the expertise, who knows the market, who doesn't have strong biases. And that's really hard because your peers, most people are not very good at buying HR tech. They don't really know what they're doing. And that's why we have a business. They are also extremely biased by their interactions with a vendor. And you might have a really good salesperson, an account manager. You might have a horrible one. You might have all these idiosyncratic things to your business. Maybe you've got weird compliance issues or integration issues, or you botched the implementation, or whatever the case may be. And you might love or hate a vendor for all the wrong reasons relative to this next person who's looking at what HRIS should I use? What ETS should I use? What payroll system, whatever the case may be. So try to find people that have the relevant expertise, which is hard, that don't have a dog in the fight, and then get down that 3 to 5 short list. Figure out what matters to you, the must haves, the nice to haves, keep it in a spreadsheet, and then go off, do your demos, take really good notes, and try to win some negotiations.
And so how do you what are the tools that you recommend for people going out for an RFP, right? Outside of the uh RFP itself where you're looking at like features and requirements, but how do you, if you were to tell folks like this is the best process you can run outside of collecting the initial vendors, what happens after that, right? What do you think of like the necessary items that they need to bring to buy HR tech successfully?
Yeah, I think it's that spreadsheet with your must haves, your nice to haves, the pricing. I also like to write down like how is the sales process, because that is a signal when buying software. The best sales reps can kind of work where they want to. They just show up and say, "Hey, here's my comp plan. Here's what numbers I hit. Hire me." And so they tend to gravitate towards really good vendors that have strong brands, strong products, that have high LTVs, and therefore aggressive commission structures. So you go off, you do these demos, you try to narrow it down to 2 or 3. I honestly think with a spreadsheet and a tool like Gamma, or Canva, or whatever you want to make like presentations in, you can do a pretty good job. I would recommend to do a presentation before you start doing this work to the powers that be, and just be like, hey, here's the problem that we're experiencing. Here's how I think we're going to solve with technology. Here's what I propose, and get the CFOs sign off. Like, yeah, that seems reasonable, and the budget is there if you can kind of prove you've done the work, and this is going to be a good solution. The IT folks, maybe in your company, marketing, maybe it's the C-suite, maybe it's the board, even depending on what you're doing, getting that internal stakeholder buy-in, and then keeping people abreast of the situation as you move through the process is also extremely important. So that it's not just we talked and then 6 months later it's like, hey, yeah, I need that $50,000, and someone's like, what are you talking about? I don't even remember that conversation. Versus, this is what we're going to do, and then, hey, we narrowed it down to 5 vendors. Hey, we narrowed it down to 2 vendors for these reasons. Hey, we got these price quotes. We negotiated down X, Y, and Z. Here's the implementation plan. Here's the ROI calculation. Here's a deck that goes through the whole process that we went through, and all of our notes, and a matrix of the vendors versus what we need and why we selected this one. That's the level of detail that is going to allow you to win.
Yeah, I think so. In the toolkit that we put together, we have a defined problem statement. We have a work backwards plan, which is when does this need to be implemented? And then you could adjust kind of the timeline and dates for your process specifically. We have a value summarization where it takes the requirements that you have and allows you to summarize across vendors. And then we have the requirements kind of format so that, before you go out to a vendor and start asking for demos and those types of things, you're giving the same information to each vendor and allowing them to kind of present themselves in a consistent form so that way you have all of the data up front. So whenever we're advising folks on how to buy software, it's very similar to a recruiting process, right? You need to do an intake session to figure out what it is that you're buying. You need to, when I was a recruiting leader, I would share with the candidates, this is what I want you to say. That's would be a yes. And then all 8 people through the interview process are making their best attempt at it makes me have a much higher success rate, much lower turnover rate to give people the answers and then say, all right, now give your best pitch. So if you define it and you have your approvals up front, you understand your requirements up front, you distribute that to the vendors so that they can all make their best attempt at delivering their solution to you, then you can consolidate that information, build the deck that you're talking about to then go prove the ROI so you can go unlock this software spend. And I think there's probably a much bigger process, like a macro. Like that's the micro. That's what happens when you buy one piece of HR tech, but you're also lobbying for budget the previous year and you're ensuring that you can get the pain recognized and identify that gap. So when it comes budget time, so that you can go get the software that you need when it's time. So there's a much bigger process to it. And all this will be available in the download so that if you need kind of like basic templates for things, you can do that. And then where you come into the picture is like, okay, let's say I want to reinvent my stack. I want to go learn the best practices of other businesses or get an advisor to kind of help understand both where I sit in the market, what my current tools are, where my gaps are to make like a proposed solution. That's where a SSR advisor would.
Yeah. And make sure you're talking to the right vendors. You see a lot of people kind of go off and they are talking to Oracle when they're a 300 employee company. They're talking to HiBob if they're 50 employees. They're talking to Gusto if they're 400. Like just all
Right.
these mistakes. And it's like, that's a lot of time that you don't have. It's a lot of headspace. We see people buy the wrong software all the time. It's really heartbreaking because it's like, this is just going to be a disaster. It's going to reflect poorly on you. It's going to be bad for your team, your employees, just everybody, the organization, because you're just looking at the wrong type of system or the system that's not designed for your organization for one way reason or another. Pricing is huge. Obviously, most of these contracts are highly negotiable, and it's nice to have lots of pricing data around what do people actually pay for this sort of solution. There's lots of ways that we can help out. I would say most teams probably don't leverage us the fullest that they can because they want to run things the way that they want to run them, which is usually a little bit more ad hoc than should be. But those are the kind of the core ways that we typically are helping folks out.
What are what's like uh I've been talking to companies like Stacks, like TA Tech Landscape. They're more discovery platforms, right? How does SSR stay on top of new platforms? How do they advise in the age of AI? What disruption are you seeing as new tools enter the market? Kind of give me your take on the market and the landscape as it stands today.
Yeah. I mean, we are talking to vendors every single day. We are using AI to stay on top of the marketplace. We've designed several agents to basically look for funding announcements, for product releases, for feature changes, for pricing changes, for user content on places like Reddit or Quora. And so we're definitely leveraging technology ourselves to stay on top of the marketplace. And then we are having one-on-one conversations with vendors. And then we're probably having like 5x more conversations with users of software and understanding what are you using, why are you using it, do you like it or not, why are you looking to switch or what kind of what's going on here? So it's just like a lot of information. And then one of the biggest challenges for us is like, how do you structure that and then surface it to our users? Because some people want to read a blog post. Some people want to have a short snippet. Some people want to talk to somebody. Some people want to interact with it through our AI. It's all, sort of up to the user. We try to make it highly accessible depending on your preference.
What's something that through those conversations you discovered that's like surprising to you or new information? Like as you poll more users and learn from more vendors, is there something that's happening in the market that is surprising or interesting?
Something I've been trying to figure out recently is how fast or not things are going to change with AI. And there's obviously a crazy amount of dialogue around it. And my hypothesis, which I've continued to maintain despite, 2 weeks ago, the public market just discounted every SaaS company by 20 or 30%. I think that the incumbents are still just so well positioned. And I actually have a demo next week with an AI first applicant tracking system that should be interesting. I demoed them 6 months ago and there really wasn't anything there, but I don't see companies building their own software. I think it's just like so hard to really build and maintain it over time and build all the features. And if your payroll system goes down, you're screwed. Like, maybe you're going to build like a simple onboarding. You're hiring 10 employees a month or something like that. Uh, I think most of these systems like aren't going to be homegrown. And so it's really, are the incumbents going to win and add in applicant or add in AI, or is it going to be AI native tools? And there are some categories when it feels like AI native is the way to go, like an LMS, where it's like, oh, you can do like adaptive learning, you can build learning materials based on my employee handbook, you can, and I think it's hard probably to change your entire architecture if you're one of these big LMS players. But something like an HRIS or an ATS, I guess I just don't see an AI native solution unseating them. I could be totally wrong, but that's kind of my current thinking. I could change it dramatically in 3 months, but I think that's kind of what's happening is these incumbents are just adding in like, oh, now you can write a job description with this AI. You can, query the database with natural language. You can run analysis on unstructured data, all this different stuff versus like, I don't know, rippling doesn't exist anymore because there's like an AI rippling that's 100 times
Yeah.
better.
So, I mean, people data is very interesting to me on the software side because it's very sensitive. So, the nature by which a company is held accountable by its employees is through the interactions each of those employees have with HR resources. So, like a job description that doesn't consider a leveling framework or a comp structure that's written by AI may open up risk to
Yeah.
two people with a similar job that have different expectations of what it should be, whether it's for their job today or for their job in the future. And so there's always this, it needs to be much more, what do I want to say, regulated. I don't know if that's the right word, but the idea that this information is creating real risk for employees who might have similar title, different experience, similar comp, different experience. Like this is risk creation that's a lot different than writing taglines for stuff, et cetera. And so the AI piece is going to be an interesting integration into the people space. For the business that I run, it's more of a summarization tool than it is a workflow and action tool just for that reason alone. And so, yeah, I think it's a lot to uncover with the AI stuff. I know there's a tremendous amount of investment in it. Like everyone wants it to be successful, but we'll see how it actually shapes up as it comes to market. But I would
Compliance is
say,
definitely gonna be a part of it, and that you're already
yeah,
seeing laws go into place now in, like, states like New York or California, where it's like you can't use these systems. There's lawsuits now against Workday, against Eightfold, so there's gonna be a huge backlash against it, particular in the HR space.
yeah, it's for every department, I would say if you're using AI, you're supposed to have a human kind of give it that final sign off.
Yeah.
And truthfully, I just don't think a lot of people are doing it and they can get away with it. But in this particular space, the temptation to write a job description and not validate it against a previous comp or leveling framework or, make an inquiry into an HRIS and not expose sensitive data. Like these are all you need to have that layer. I'm not sure that the humans are disciplined enough to not resist the temptation of just having the automation go the whole way there. And then lastly, I think from an HR perspective, there's a lot of data disconnect. I don't think HR systems are as well maintained as the sales revenue and financial systems. And so there could be bad data quality as another issue. But I digress. I would say like, the interesting thing about talking to someone in your space who kind of like has this macro look on the environment of HR tech is you have taken that macro look across a much larger part of the space. So you guys have a people job board at
Mhm.
SSR. So you have like every HR TA job just consolidated in one space. How'd you bring that to the market? What was the demand for that? And you know, where should people find that?
Yeah, it's peoplehopsjobs.io, and we started a couple of years ago as just a way to recognize companies that I think were giving HR the credit it deserves. I think there are a lot of HR jobs out there that are just like, do you want to run payroll for us? Do you want to be like our benefits manager? And they're just like the old school Toby from the office HR jobs from companies that are like, oh yeah, HR, it's a cost center. We're trying to keep the cost as low as possible. It's not strategic. And then there's a crop of companies that just really look at HR as a way to grow their business. They look at people operations as core to their overall strategy, and they empower their teams to be a part of that strategy. They give them budgets, they give them resourcing, they give them a leeway. And I think you're really starting to see this at an accelerated rate. There's still a bad rap for HR teams. A friend of mine is actually graduating from a top five business school. She wants to get into HR, and somebody at a party at her house was like, "You're gonna throw your life away. Like, what are you doing going to HR?" And I think that's the way a lot of people still feel is like, what you're smart, you're going into one of the top business schools in the whole world. Why are you going to HR? Like go to product management, do revenue stuff, go work in investing, all these things. The reality is that there are a lot of companies now that will take that person and elevate them, and that person will have a massive impact, just like if they were on the marketing team or the sales team or BD team or whatever. But it still is a minority of companies. And so we wanted a place to highlight those companies that seem like they're really looking at HR differently to get people in those jobs and encourage the marketplace to have more of those jobs.
Yeah, I think there's many a path into an HR role, and I think the role itself benefits from having different perspectives. So you and I both come from the VC space, and it's not uncommon for an operator to shift into people and try to demand of it the same operational excellence that they would out of another group. And that might come at the expense of not having all of the tactical HR knowledge, which on the other side of that, you might have all the tactical HR knowledge in the world but not have that operational capability that someone else might bring to the table. And so, you know, I think for better or for worse, HR is a controversial role to take on regardless of your background because it's a lot of responsibility and but also a I don't want to say it's a cost center because we don't believe that, but it is like you're paying for HR services at a company, and whether or not you could turn that into revenue or return on investment is a function of that department's capability, the way they're structured and accepted by the business. So you're going to take on that role and to lead this part of the business, tremendously valuable, but a lot of sacrifice to be made. And so it's always interesting to hear how different people get into the business. But I digress. Let's talk about a little bit more of Select Software Reviews, kind of like what do you want to plug now that you have this audience? Like where do you want people to go to interact with Select Software Reviews? How do you want them to know about your business? What's the value that they can get from your team?
Sure. I think if you're looking to buy new software, and that could be we're moving from spreadsheets to our first system, we're consolidating to an all-in-one, we're moving off a PDO, we need to add an ATS, an EOR, performance management, whatever the case may be, you should definitely talk to one of our advisors. It's free. It's rated 4.9 stars, used by organizations like MIT, Indianapolis Colts, Chip City, Frank and Eileen, thousands of others. And they'll help steer you in the right direction and be sort of a concierge of sorts to make sure that you're going to buy the right software because you don't want to buy the wrong tool for the wrong reasons at the wrong price. That's just like a complete disaster. So, our team will help make sure you buy the right stuff for the right reasons at the right price. And that'll allow you to accomplish your goals. And what I found in HR is like, it's sort of a virtuous cycle where if you're able to really nail one of these software procurement cycles, get the right system in, the cool thing about HR tech is like everybody in the company uses it. And so if you've got the right performance management system, it's like, wow, like this thing's awesome. We're so glad that HR did this. We're getting a lot of value out of this. Like this is awesome versus the exact opposite, which happens all the time, right? And it's like, oh, we have this payroll system that I can't even, add PTO in and blah, blah, blah. And it's broken. There's no mobile experience and all this other stuff. So when you nail it, it gives you the leeway to go off and do your next project.
So selectsoftwarereviews.com, is there anywhere specific to go to get an advisor?
Just in the nav bar up top, you can click on advisor.
Okay. And it's totally free. How do you swing that?
It's totally free. So we get paid by vendors to make introductions. We work with virtually every vendor in the space. So everyone from kind of the old school guys, the big guys like the Paylocities and the ADPs, down to the upstart companies like your Bobs and your Ripplings and your Deals and stuff like that. So we don't really, there are some companies that are like, look, I need to buy a Pay or ADP because my CFO said that's what we're doing. And, or maybe it's like, that's what I'm comfortable with. Like I've used all those solutions and I just want to figure out what's the one that's right for this company that I just joined. That's great. We'll help you out there. If you're like, hey, I want the best in class, the cheapest, the this, the that, the other thing, we can help you think about those permutations and get you the right vendors.
Got it. And then if you're looking for a job, it's peopleopsjobs.io.
Yep. Yeah.
And then if you're not yet sold on an advisor quite yet, but you want to get some of the advice, you have a GPT, or is that a full replacement? How do people think about the Select Software Reviews GPT?
I think that it can be a replacement for people that some people view getting on the phone as a luxury, even for 15 or 20 minutes. Like they just don't want to do it. And the GPT is not as good as the person, but it's 95% as good. And so, if you're like, hey, I want to save the 20 minutes and get like what's probably the right answer, that's a good way to do it.
Yep. Well, links to all those will be below the video in the description. And for anyone who's interested in buying HR tech, we have the HR tech buyer's toolkit. We have the select software reviews links down below. And with these tools, you should be able to find, select, buy the right software for your business and at least get the advisory that helps you make the right decision. Any final thoughts with Phil?
I don't think so. I think that buying HR tech can be really, really difficult and a bit of a slog, especially where everybody's so busy and it's easy to be like, I'll do this tomorrow. I'll do this tomorrow. And my recommendation is like, it reminds me of when I was like engagement ring shopping and you're like, do I have to become like a diamond expert to buy this one thing? And then like, there's no utility for me in the future. It's sort of in many ways the same way. And so it's like, just like press the easy button. Just use one of the advisors and go forth and conquer. Do all the other stuff that you have on your plate. And yeah, hopefully we'll see you in the community and going to Transform, going to all these conferences. We do webinars and stuff too. It's like awesome just to connect with other folks and hopefully continue to share learnings.
Yeah, I would, I think use the right advisor at Select Software Reviews. You put the findings into the toolkit. You could go RFP the next best software for your business and get something across the finish line with high ROI, fast implementation, and a good return on investment. So
100%.
give it a download. Reach out to Phil and the Select Software's team for an advisor. And for more information on how to buy HR tech, we'll be talking with a few others from the TA tech industry. And you can find that in the blog and podcast down below. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, everybody.